welcome again into Strategies for Living, the television version. I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. Delighted that you've tuned in, joined with me today here for Strategies for Living, where we're all about helping us all live healthier, happier, more peaceful lives, body, mind, spirit, and relationship. And we do that by inviting wonderful life strategists to come on each and every time we do Strategies for Living. We've got some great life strategists this evening. I know them very well because I see them almost daily. They come on 710 Keel, 101.7 FM. They are the host of American Ground Radio, and comes on right before Strategies for Living. Louis R. Avallone and Stephen Parr, gentlemen, welcome. Welcome back to the television version of Strategies. So, how did a couple of nice guys like you get into a situation like this?
I blame Louis.
I was going to blame you. So
that's kind of how that.
It started with a book, right? You guys wrote a book before you did anything else, huh?
We did. We started actually with a political project where we're trying to teach political parties about how to be better leaders. The idea is if you want to inspire voters of the future, you have to develop leaders today.
Right.
And that's where it all started with a group we called Conservative Ground. And as we were working on that, one of the things we realized we needed was to write a book.
Yeah.
And that was kind of Louis's heart, and so that's what we put together.
yeah, so we put a book together, and in the process, July the 4th was approaching.
Right.
And so
The book is titled,
Bright Spots, Big Country, What Makes America Great.
Yep.
And so as July the 4th was approaching last year, we had the idea, why don't we interview folks from all over the country, folks that you and I would know, Alveda King.
Absolutely.
As one example.
Sweet Lou Dunbar from the Globetrotters
Yeah,
had him
yeah.
on. It was
Yeah.
we had Tucker Carlson from Fox News was on.
I caught some, and what an incredible, idea. And people don't know this about radio, but radio over a holiday. Everybody still listens,
But it's reruns.
It's reruns.
Right.
Yeah, everything's reruns. So you guys come and
We said, let's
go
do
to the
some-
station. Let's do something original.
Let's do something original. So we interviewed these folks from all over the country, and we asked them one simple question: what makes America great? And the answers were remarkable.
Blew your mind, didn't it?
And so we put the show together, and it aired from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. on July the 4th last year. And Keel said, hey, this sounded really great. How would you like to do this every day?
Every day.
And, of course, we said, we would like to do that very much.
Well, now, you're you come from broadcasting.
Yeah,
so
about 17 years in television news, and did another radio show before.
Right.
So I do have a bit of a background in this.
Yeah.
And this.
And it shows.
Well,
I just want to tell you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm assuming.
You keep hitting my buddy straight.
Yeah, it's
I'm
quite
assuming-
the contrast.
I'm assuming it shows by the
you do
ego.
good.
That's the people in television. We all have that big ego, but
Exactly.
that was that was something I was really proud to have done for a long time. But there's a time when I felt a different calling, and this show I really do feel is a bit of a calling of, in this time in America, politics is so divisive. You cannot talk about politics with people out of fear.
How let's disclose this. We need to disclose. If you listen to the show, you're going to find out Louis is head of the Republican Party here in the
Caddo Parish.
Caddo Parish. But what has caused this divisiveness? Why are we so polarized in our politics? I mean, I can remember, most of my years growing up, when we were small, you and I, you're a little younger than I am, but around here, to vote and to make your vote mean something, when I was a kid, you had to be a Democrat. Everybody was a Democrat. That changed, 60s, mid-60s or so? Republican Party really took hold and has had a foothold in this area ever since.
I think we've stopped debating about ideas, and we simply have resorted to basically the lowest common denominator, and that is to dehumanize our opponent.
Are we not we at this table, but we, the media, are we culpable for some of that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think of it as the law of unintended consequences, right? So you have an idea of we want to win elections. Both
Right.
parties do this,
Right.
right? We
Sure.
want to win elections. So
Sure.
how do you win elections? Well, you get people to vote. But it's hard to get individual people to vote, so let's get groups of people to vote. So the parties start focusing on winning elections by focusing on which groups they want to do. So now they're dividing the nation up based upon groups. We've got to win women 25 to 54. We've got to win African American males. We've got to win Hispanic migrants with brand new to the country. We've got to, so we start dividing the country up into small groups in order to win elections. And instead of winning the elections to unite the country, we end up dividing the country in order to win elections. It's an unintended consequence
Right.
of the political strategy of the parties themselves.
Now, you guys launched the Daily Show. You had did the July 4th show.
The Daily Show's on Comedy Central.
Actually, American Ground Radio.
Yes,
You
that's-
launched American Ground Radio. Thank you, Stephen.
He's also funny.
Yeah, well,
he's talented and funny.
Well, that's debatable. We'll talk about that off the air. Don't ever insult the
No,
host again.
really.
Don't do that.
Exactly. Really.
When did you? Yes, he's already messed you up.
can't bring him really
Can't bring him
anywhere.
any place, Yeah,
Anywhere.
When did you guys launch American Ground Radio?
September.
Okay, so surprised at some of the feedback you've gotten over the, what is that? It's hard to count. 7 months now.
I think it's
Biggest
been
surprise.
the biggest surprise, or the number of people listening.
Oh yeah.
And that, because you're sitting in a studio and you basically are talking to one another. There's a producer there.
Right.
And it's kind of like sitting in a stadium that's not filled with people.
Yeah, you're not getting that feedback.
Exactly.
You're not getting the roar of the crowd.
And so you're like,
to see how big the crowd is in the
right.
moment.
Right.
So that's been remarkable in terms of the number of people that are listening that you run into around town, and so that's because that was part of our goal, is we wanted to attract an audience that wouldn't ordinarily listen to talk radio, because politics is for the same reason that you brought out at the beginning of the show. It's become so divisive, and for a lot of people, they're like, you know what? I've got a limited amount of energy, and I'm just not going to give it to all of this bickering and yelling at one another. I'm just not.
Yeah.
I'd rather listen to something else.
Who wants to listen to the radio on the drive home and become more angry? That's nobody really wants that.
Yeah.
You've already got other drivers you got to deal with. You don't need anger coming through the radio.
Yeah. Well, these two are not on the road, folks, because you're safe. You're safe from both of these guys because they're on Keel. On American Ground Radio, 6:05 to 7. It can be on your ground, on your
That's
your
right.
drive home.
That's right.
On your ground home. And then stay tuned and listen to Strategies for Living after, but we'll tell you about that later. So, did you guys have any idea? You did. You have any idea really what it took
No, not an
to
idea.
produce a daily? Because a daily radio show, you knew it.
Yeah.
It's not just walking in, turning on the microphone, and letting it flow.
It can be.
It can sound like that.
Well,
yeah.
and it can be that if you don't want a good radio show. But if you
But you
want to
guys
do
have
it
a
well,
good radio
Well,
show.
thank you very
Yeah.
much. And as do you. And if you want to do it well,
He's making up for the earlier
Yeah, I know.
infraction.
Yeah.
You're doing good.
You are doing good.
if you want to do it well, you do have to prepare, and you have to know that you're putting something together for an audience.
Yeah.
You have to keep in mind the people that you're trying to talk to on the other side of the microphone, people that you don't know, people that you'll never see. You have to keep them in mind, and they have to be the most important thing in your mind as you're putting that show together. If you want to create something that's any good.
Do you talk to one person when you're communicating? Do you get on and talk to your wife, your mother, your dad?
I ought to. He does.
Yeah.
He does. He has someone in mind.
I actually, doing weather, that was a piece of advice I'd give anybody that I worked in that was coming new into broadcast television. I would say, look, it's just you, and it's just the camera on the other side. It's just
Right.
the two of you.
But who are you talking
But
to?
you have to talk to somebody on the other end of that camera. And so I always had specific individual people who, and I was doing weather, So
How many years did you, because you worked in this market?
for 7 years
for-
here,
Okay.
and I was in Tyler for 8.5, and then I was in another market before that one up in north of Dallas. But I would always focus on someone who was interested in the topic, but didn't want to get so nerdy that they're, when you start saying things like thermal advection, their eyes would glaze over. So I wanted to make
What's he
sure-
talking about?
I have no
Exactly.
idea
So it
most
all would
of
have
the
been
time.
good proxies for, but you have to have one individual person that's in mind that you're talking to on the other side of the lens or on the other side of the microphone. That way it sounds like you're having a personal conversation because in your mind you actually are.
You are, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's good communication.
Yeah.
Do you,
Yeah, absolutely.
Has that rubbed off on you?
No, not at all, actually. But we want to remind folks to look at life around us, the headlines, in a different way.
Yeah.
Most Americans only read the headlines. In fact, over 50% of Americans stop at the headlines. They never read through to the news article. And so we want to just inspire folks to look at something. Maybe they've looked at a particular issue their entire life the same way. If we can say something that might spark some interest in another direction, even if they completely disagree with us today, that's really what we're after, because we want to remind folks that there is greatness within them. And too often, people feel they are victims.
Absolutely.
Victims of our circumstances in life, whether that's in our culture, victims of the government. And if we could get folks thinking that they are the hero
Absolutely.
of their own story in life, that's what it's all about.
They are the host of American Ground Radio, 1017 FM and 710 Keel, every weeknight between 6:05 and 7. Stephen Parr, Louis R. Avalone are our life strategists today here on Strategies for Living. We have more with them. We'll be back. You stay tuned.
A promise was made. A promise that hit the beaches of Normandy. A covenant that split the skies over Berlin. A vow that captured Iwo Jima. A promise was made. A solemn oath that liberated Seoul. A sacred trust that defended Khe Sanh. A pact that dug in Da Nang. A contract that weathered Tet. A promise was made. A pledge that stormed the desert in Iraq. A bond that patrolled door to door in Fallujah. An IOU that braved IEDs in Kandahar. A promise was made to America's veterans. A promise we all must keep. DAV fights for all veterans and their families so they get the health care, financial benefits, and support they earned. If you're a veteran who needs help or you'd like to help us keep the promise, visit DAV.org.
It's been more than 5 minutes. No, it hasn't.
Hey, can you just
I
keep
want
it down
it.
for
It's
me?
my turn. No, it isn't.
Please, just keep it down.
I remember days when just driving down the street would give me anxiety. And now look at me.
Don't get me wrong, I still don't love crowded places. But it's good to get out again.
Noises like that used to make me hit the deck. But now, I can keep going.
Transitioning from the military can be tough. We all have unique experiences, but many veterans are facing similar challenges. Life goes on, but some things are different now. Visit MakeTheConnection.net to watch our stories and learn ways to create the story you want to live. No one can write it for you. Make sure it's a good one. Make the Connection.
Welcome back. Welcome back into Strategies for Living. You're obviously watching Strategies for Living. I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. I'm glad you are watching Strategies for Living, but don't forget you can listen. You can listen to Strategies for Living because this program started and still is a radio program where News Radio 710 AM and 101.7 FM Keel, Monday through Friday, 7:05 to 8, following these gentlemen. And on Sundays, 9:05 to 10, Strategies for Living. Hope you'll tune in. Also, strategiesforliving.com. Today, on the television version, Louis R. Avalone, Stephen Parr from American Ground Radio. They're 6:05 to 7 every weeknight on Keel, 710 AM, 101.7 FM. So, also authors of the book, Bright Spots, Big Country, What Makes America Great. You can get it on Amazon. You can go to AmericanGroundRadio.com, also iTunes, Facebook.
Yep.
Find them they're everywhere. They're everywhere.
Just Google us.
I got to ask you, guys, because there's several, the show is totally entertaining to me.
Good.
But I have to listen because I'm on the
You're
way
forced
to this.
to,
I'm
under
forced listening. No, seriously, I was listening. You guys know I was listening to the show before we did strategies. The segments that you do are thoroughly entertaining. I think you're accomplishing the things that you're wanting to accomplish in shifting away from making people, you entertain people. And part of the entertainment are the American mamas.
Big part.
I gotta ask you, okay, whose idea was this? Denise Arthur and
Terry Netterville
are the American mamas. Where'd you find these girls?
Well, I tell you, they're right here in Shreveport.
Yeah, they're obviously soccer moms and
Very invested
whatever.
in this community for many, many years.
Yeah.
And I think a part of it was, again, we wanted to attract an audience of folks that would not ordinarily listen to talk radio.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of women, they don't talk politics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it is, for many women, confrontational.
Sure.
It's negative. And very frankly...
Not for the mamas, though.
Well, not for the mamas. And I think they serve as an excellent example that you can be an excellent mom, an excellent wife, and still be plugged into what's going on in our community from a political perspective.
So if you haven't listened to the show, every day Stephen or Lewis will throw out, and I gather that they come from Facebook,
Sure.
they come from
Lots of
people who
questions,
know
yeah.
you, people who come up and say, hey, what would the mamas think of this? Or what do you think of this? And you throw it to the American mamas, right? And so, 5 minutes or so, 7 minutes
Yeah.
they get?
Yeah,
and,
it's a 10-minute segment,
yeah.
so we read the question, then they take up the rest of that block.
Right.
And it really is about what's going on in the community, what's going on in the country, and from their perspective, what is it that's important to them? And we don't always necessarily agree with what they're saying.
We don't always know what they're going to say.
Right. That's obvious some days from your responses.
Sure.
But that's the whole point.
Right.
Is
Right.
that they are smart, they are talented, they are powerful and compassionate
And articulate.
and you've got to have that voice if you want to reach the entire community.
They are also Southern mamas. They
Absolutely.
are also hometown mamas.
Their
Sure.
kids grew up
Yeah.
saying yes sir, yes ma'am.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And probably got a pat on the behind.
If they didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
And there are obviously women who don't give the response, let me see what my husband thinks.
Yeah, or what is politically correct, so I
Right.
can
Right.
say this.
Right.
You know.
They would rather be correct than politically correct.
Right.
But you have to have confidence in order to be able to express yourself in a way that may offend others. It may not be, if you're a people pleaser, this may not be the way to go in terms of getting involved in politics. And I think they serve as an excellent example to say, no, you can be a people pleaser while at the same time standing your ground, standing for principle, standing for what's right.
And Terry and Denise have such a unique way of approaching things. Terry comes at things from a bless your heart type of standpoint, and she really has a very sweet way of going and getting
Denise
the
is
point
a little
across.
bit more in your face.
Denise will go straight to the heart, and she will say it with some southern phrase that you've never heard before, but makes perfect sense in the moment.
It may seem a little threatening as well, but nevertheless, she says it with love.
Yeah, it's really funny stuff.
Yeah, thoroughly entertaining. If you have not heard American Mamas, not that these guys aren't good too, they are. They're entertaining for the entire hour, but the 10-minute segment with the American Mamas is worth tuning into. And it comes at different times during the show, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
What's been the hardest part of you adjusting? Because you're a business guy.
Yeah.
You run a company.
Right.
Abalone Door and Ironwork, started by your dad.
Right.
Who's also, by the way, written about in the book.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think the biggest, adjustment is finding more succinct ways to make your point. You know, I tend to, as anyone may know me, I tend to be very verbose, and I can talk and talk and talk.
A little bit.
But on the radio, you have a very limited amount of time to be able to communicate with someone because, while they're listening to you, they're also getting out of their car and they're going to pick up milk at the grocery store, they're picking up the cleaning, and then they get back.
We get them for 7 to 10 minute, 20 minute chunks.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And so you've got to have this relationship in a very small window of time. And I think that's been one of the biggest challenges. But you know what? All growth happens outside of our comfort zone, and so it's allowed me the opportunity to grow in my communication skills. And it's certainly one that I continue to chip away at every day.
What are the biggest challenges that we as a community face politically in the next year, the next 4 years, the next 10 years?
Well, tell you the truth, it's the issue of race. I mean, race has been infused in so much of our local politics that it really blinds folks to talking about the qualifications of the candidates. And we've got a mayor's race this year. And all that anyone can talk about is the color of skin. That's important. But what's more important are the qualifications, the content of their character.
Who's most qualified?
Absolutely.
To run these cities.
Yeah, and then you get into the ideas or the principles of smaller government, of lower taxation, of financial responsibility, knowing what your government is spending and what they're spending it on. Those are all discussions that come after, as a community, you remain focused on the qualifications of those in elected office.
It's somewhat, and there's a lot being written, print, and you guys are talking about it, and so are Robert and Aaron in the morning on Keel. The thing is, we're all critical of governments wasting. You got a tax election coming up in Shreveport. It's a renewal. People have been saying all kinds of things.
Right.
But I know you guys are going to tackle that this week.
Well, Stephen is much more lenient on this whole tax matter than perhaps I am.
It's because my frustration comes from a bigger standpoint. I don't think going back to the voters every few years to renew a tax is any way to run a government, especially when the taxes for this specific taxes for the uniforms for police officers, this specific taxes for city workers. How am I as a voter supposed to know what the appropriate funding for a police officer's uniform is? That's why we elect people. They're supposed to put people in place who know that. Let's just set a flat tax rate for the whole city. We're going to be 6%, we're going to be 5%. What is it? Let's set that.
I'd actually like to do that for the whole country, but that's that's another story.
Let's set what the tax rate is, and then let's operate the budget off of what we have, rather than saying this little piece needs to be voted on and this little piece needs to be voted on. I have to become an expert in city financial management. I don't have time for that.
Yeah, but this entire tax matter is really emblematic of the frustration that taxpayers have with their city government because they don't feel like they've been given a choice in the matter.
Is that a fair criticism that, the electorate says they're just not getting it done? And there's, I think we've seen it nationally, we've seen it locally. Throw the bums out of office, drain the swamp.
Well, look at the results.
Yeah.
I mean, time and time again. I mean, you look at how well a city organizes and manages a project, a building, an objective, and then you look at that same or something similar in the private sector, and you see wildly different results.
Yeah.
So,
All you have to do really, look at the growth we've had in this area, both Shreveport and Bossier, right on I-20. Look at the advantages we have in this area. We've got I-20, we've got I-49, we've got Barksdale, we've got a port, we've got health, this is a health center, we've got universities, BIBC, LSUS. We've got everything.
The Med Center? Yeah.
The Med Center. We've got everything it should take to make a great growing city. Go 90 miles west. Compare the growth of Tyler, Texas to the growth of Shreveport. Tyler's a much smaller city with a lot less advantages. They're growing a lot faster, and it's because of how they're managing the city as opposed to how we're managing ours.
Well, you know, I would love to have another couple of hours with you guys. We don't have it today, but I can tell you folks the way you can have, well, you can have 5 hours a week if you like with these guys. All you got to do is 6 o'clock to 7, tune in to 710 Keel, 101.7 FM. Actually, stay tuned afterwards for Strategies for Living.
Of course.
But tune into these guys for American Ground Radio. They do a great job, and you can continue the conversation with them. Stephen Parr, Louis R. Avalone, thank you for being great life strategists. We'll have you back often. And keep up the great work on the radio.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
Folks, thank you for tuning in to Strategies for Living. If you enjoyed our program today, well, come back and join us. Go to strategiesforliving.com. Listen to us on Strategies for Living, 7:05 to 8 every weeknight on 101.7 FM and 710 Keel, and on Sundays, 9:05 to 10. For Louis and for Stephen, I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. See you next time here on Strategies for Living.